and welcome to TelecomTV's main agenda, our regular super panel series sponsored by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and Intel that focuses on the crucial issues affecting telcos and CSPs. Is open infrastructure the key to unlocking 5G potential for CSPs? That's the question we're going to be posing this evening to our panel, who are on stage with me tonight. It's quite fitting, really, seeing that we're in Los Angeles and just down the road, MWC Americas is in full swing, and it seems every telco and vendor is promoting some kind of 5G first. It's exciting times. I know when I started back in the 90s, one or two of you may remember those times as well, telecoms was quite frankly boring. It was dull. Decades where nothing really happened. And then along came GSM as a regional solution to helping the fledgling mobile industry get established. And then whoosh, you know, success worthy of Hollywood, really. One way of looking at mobile generations is by the markets that's defined them. 3G can be seen as being defined by mobile data, 4G defined by smartphones, and there's every chance that 5G could well be defined by vertical markets. 5G could open up whole new business areas, but only if it can downplay and manage the hype and if all the necessary required pieces are in place. One of those pieces is so-called open networking. So hence we're asking the question, is open infrastructure key to unlocking the potential of 5G for CSPs? We've got a great lineup of panelists hopefully going to answer this question for us tonight. And joining me this evening, starting on my immediate left, Klaus Pedersen, Hybrid IT Telco Segment at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Welcome, Klaus.
Thank you.
Next to Klaus is Mansour Hanif, Advisory Board Member UK 5G, formerly of BT and EE. And as of next week, I hear CTO of UK regulator Ofcom.
Are you supposed to?
Congratulations.
It's been announced today.
It's been announced today. Everything's official.
I'm
but
here
Mansour's
in private capacity. These views are not the views of.
Please don't take them as being anything to do with Ofcom yet.
Until Monday.
Until Monday. Next to Mansour, we have Caroline Chan, who is Vice President Network Platforms Group and General Manager 5G Infrastructure Division at Intel. Welcome again.
I got a fan.
Next to Caroline is Mustafa Ergun, who is Chief Technology Advisor at Turk Telecom. Welcome to our super panel. And next to Mustafa, Jason Keane, who is Head of Digital BSS Platform at Ericsson. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
According to Arthur D. Little, 5G is going to open up something like $500 billion of addressable and incremental revenue opportunity as it helps telcos embrace their enterprise customers and digitally transform. There's many such studies. All of them are overwhelmingly positive. But the journey to 5G is going to require this major transformation of network infrastructure if CSPs are going to be in a position to offer these high-value new services to their customers. First question, then. Let's have a look at a bit of a wish list. And we'll go down the line. Klaus, if I can ask you first. What are some of the key infrastructure elements required to support 5G?
Well, I think as Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, we provide some of the lower-level elements, if you will, in that network, and the availability of standards that allow innovation to flourish even at that level, so that the innovation that comes in from the IT industry, which is very rapid in terms of things like memory-centric computing, as an example, that will completely change computing as we know it, that the standards are in place so that can be absorbed over time and it becomes available. It's not a static world. We cannot define the architectures today and hope that they will pass through for the next 10 years. So having those standards in place so the innovation can flourish is critical.
Mansour?
Yeah, I think the classic ones for the operators are the obviously spectrum, site upgrades, site towers to upgrade, small cells, etc. So I think that the CSPs are going to be very much focused on making sure that the traditional way of rollout moves ahead, because it's not easy. They're going to have to swap out all the antennas and put in new small cells. It's going to take time. And that's where I think open networking can help, because with the architecture of 5G, which is completely virtualized, you can actually in parallel open up pockets of 5G in cooperation with other players in an open network way, which can actually help the mobile operators to get a faster coverage across the whole country, rather than doing it traditionally as we had to do in the past.
Caroline, some of the key network elements.
Yeah, so I won't repeat what everyone says, but Monday I was in an event and I was at the Network Edge event, and happened to sit next to me was Microsoft Azure team. It was very refreshing to hear what she said. To them, there's no such thing, the things we talked about. They're unhindered by all this. For them, OCP is just given. Open compute platform is a given. Web scale is a given. Large scale rollout with the open environment is completely open. It's a given. So in my mind, I'm just thinking, for us to truly be able to tap into the vertical market, which is their bread and butter, how do we get there from where we are today? We've been in a network transformation journey now for a while. All of us been in this. How do we get from where we are and to there in a hurry so that we can ensure the 5G rollout actually have ROI the way that the cloud guys has been driving the ROI on the back of our 4G network?
Well, I'm sure we're going to be expanding on this in the next few minutes or so. But Mustafa, what other key elements are required?
So, from the operator view, or if you're a vendor, you sell a product or service, and you have to support that product as a technical support over years, and that takes your time, effort, innovation, performance. And for me, 3G and 4G are technical support of 2G. So for 5G, we are trying to find out new venues, so vertical markets, and it looks like an opportunity, but it's a chicken egg situation. Who is going to invest in the operator side? Because operators are already being hurt with full of investments, and I'm sure we will have ways to incorporate third parties like for remote driving, we would like to get like Bosch into our system. For remote surgery, we would like to get a medical company into our system to solve this chicken egg problem. And open initiatives are handing off the burden of operators and vendors to the software community, which fortified the IT industry over years, and we'd like to get a piece of it, I believe.
And Jason?
Yeah, I think for me, with Ericsson, we've heavily invested in 5G, but it's not just about the RAN anymore. It's about the entire ecosystem that makes up 5G. If you look at 3G and 4G, we've got to take a broader picture than just the RAN and just the spectrum. We've got to look at the OSS to BS, and even northbound to that. How can we, from a 5G technology, enable those business cases? So while a lot of the focus has been on enabling the spectrum, enabling the service, whether it's edge, whether it's central, it's actually a much bigger picture, because I think the key aspect for me is, and we mentioned this previously, how we monetize this layer, how we actually make money out of it, and that's the key thing we'd like to answer.
The word and term open is a little bit emotive. It can mean many things. We've already touched on some of it in our opening statements there. But when we talk about open networking, specifically open networking, and how it affects telcos, what do we mean by open? Mansoor, can I come to you first on this? Because you're sort of a very strong believer in open.
I'm very open, and I'm very networks. So yeah, no, in my conception, and I think shared by a lot of people I speak to, is at the widest possible sense. And the reason why I think it's open across the board from networks, but also into digital infrastructure, is because the opportunity is there to actually widen the universe of CSPs, but of every enterprise, really. So as that universe is expanding, there's opportunities to actually get into those new revenues we want, which are clearly not going to come from our existing customers alone. They're going to come from other customers that are traditionally not customers. So to reach out to those, you've got to be open, because they are not traditionally part of our enclosed ecosystem. So there's an incentive for CSPs, but for everybody else to open up. And I think, to your point about digital transformation of infrastructure, that is absolutely happening, whether it's enterprise or whether it's public infrastructure. The digital transformation is happening, connectivity is underpinning that. What type of connectivity is the big prize? And if it's 5G, that opens up that world of opportunity to CSPs, but only if they open up the systems so those new players can actually interconnect and get value from their side.
Jason, can I get you as an alternative view, please?
I have a different interpretation, and I suppose when we talk about open, for me the interpretation is open standards, right? And I think the challenge is in the true sense of open, everything's visible, you can see it, but there has to be an incentive to to come in and invest into this, to invest in new technology. So my view as open is that when we look at existing CSPs, they will not be experts in everything. They will require some vendor to come in with a product that fits a solution, but that product that comes in must be open insofar as it will quite happily interact in the ecosystem. So my view of open is, if you want to build the next 5G, business cases support it, maybe you have to take 3 or 4 components from individuals, but you don't have to necessarily know what's in them, but you have to make sure that they work together. So I'm more keen on the open standard that the components will interconnect to deliver the business case.
Klaus?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I believe you can have open and practically proprietary, and you can have proprietary but standardized and therefore in effect open. What our customers are looking for is choice. So depending on what type of CSP you are, when we look at the infrastructure, there needs to be a certain amount of integration, testing, etc., that comes with the elements. As you were saying, our CSP customers are not going to be the ones that do all the testing and hardening of all the components. So I think that the challenge here is to have this sufficient openness so we can actually encourage the innovation and moving the industry forward, but still enable companies like Ericsson to actually serve the role of integrator and hardening the systems end to end, so end customers of the CSP can then get the service they desire. And it's a fine balance, and I think the industry will have to find it based on commercial terms.
I think there is still a wider, again, I'll open up more. Open means having access to shared infrastructure. And what I'm saying now is that shared infrastructure is no longer just our RAN or our core or our transport. It includes the lampposts, the fiber, the ducts, and on the urban communities project that we've been working with the UK 5G, which is going on in the West Midlands. And it's a public-private partnership investment of up to £100 million to try and test out this model, really. And what that means is the local authorities will put into the pot their assets, or the public assets, and in return, they want to have open and shared access to all of those assets. That is a huge issue also for the CSPs, because even speaking to people here in the industry in the US, people are concerned that there's not fair access to those assets. And so the open is also the concept of having access to all the assets in an open and transparent and fair way, which can be monetized, but in a fair and open way.
Mustafa, you're our sole telco representative on the panel this evening. How does Telecom see open networking, and what can it do for Telecom?
Of course, we contribute heavily on open networking. The initiative started by AT&T, and we contribute as a board member. And as from the telco side, we have to ask this question: is open open? Is Linux open, for example? Is Hadoop open? Is it low cost, or is it shared, or is it a transformation from capex to opex? We have to find in our benchmarker so that we should name the open. And Hadoop is not open. We have Cloudera, we have Hortonworks, we have Mapr. Linux is not open. We have Red Hat. Android is not open. But I agree with him. Open should be shared. And but it's a challenge. Today, open initiatives from the telco is like a sandbox. They want to try out whether it will work or not. But at the end, I don't believe it will be a low-cost initiative, but it will be a move for shared infrastructure, where we can leverage so many other things and put more automation in it to cut our costs, basically.
And what you're saying, open doesn't mean free.
That's true.
People can make money for open. Red Hat does quite well in open.
Yeah, but this is the thing. Everybody likes open, but nobody wants to run it. And that's the key thing, right? So if you take that analogy, right, we love the idea open, we have transparency, but you go to your operations team and say, hey, I downloaded this off the web. Please operate it for me to go. Where's my back-end support? What happens when it goes wrong? You're asking me for, 6 nines of uptime. Who's going to support this? So
but I disagree there. I mean, again, in the same way that open doesn't mean free, open doesn't mean not managed. We want carrier-grade open platforms. As we want. And I think we're not there yet, but I think another year of these trials, for example, will get us there, or get us very close to that.
But then we're on to the definition of open. So when you say carrier-grade open trials, you're talking open from an interoperability perspective, but you're still expecting vendors to deliver that block to you for interaction. And that's where I feel open needs to be. We need open standards, and standards that we can interoperate in. But then if we go too far open, it can take, I mentioned before, 18 months to get an open standard ratified. But innovation generally outpaces the ability for standards to keep up, right? So it's trying to find that balance.
Caroline, can I just ask you, we're seeing open go through all aspects of this industry now. And there are organizations that are starting projects from the Open RAN, Open Cellular, you name it. Is this a natural evolution of the network to explore, to experiment, to see what works, what doesn't work? Do we generally believe that we can take the philosophies of open and extend them all the way across the value of the network?
So I just put in a pitch, and I am on the board of TIP. That's one thing that if you look at when we started it, we say, okay, if Facebook was one of the founders along with Deutsche Telekom, Nokia, and us, for example, when we looked at it, we said, then if the web scale company can take something like OCP and make bundle some money on it, significant margin growth. Look at their stock price compared with, say, AT&T stock price. I mean, there's a dramatic difference. What can we learn from it? So I think some of the truth, probably somewhere in between. There's money that Ericsson, Nokia can make. You bring a lot of expertise into this area, the system integration side. At the same time, when you look at for 5G. Intel has been involved in a lot of trials and proof of concept. When we go to the enterprise, when we sit down talking with the CIO, the guys are not coming from the telco background, they expect a white box. They don't expect a black box. True, they want us to perform a certain SLA and carry grade, but giving them something that's black box is very difficult for them to accept. So we start looking at, in TIP, we start looking at what is it that in the web scale side we can learn and take what's appropriate into this. We do a lot of, there's a trial and error, right? There's a fail fast kind of thing. So in fact, I have this slide that I've been using to present to different advisory board about what have we learned in this whole edge compute, a passion and a job of mine. And we are about to present that again to the 5G Americas. There's certain things we learn is that the enterprise is absolutely the decision maker in this case, because they pay the bill. They pay the bill. They want certain things to be done, and we and the telco CSPs have to come in and deliver and fulfill. So that's something now we start talking with the cloud guys and learn. Learn from them, and what is it that their best known methods that we can borrow and use in our world and be profitable at the same time do what Jason is saying, right? Not to just say, here's a backup part and go at it, have fun.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that the CSPs are struggling with the business model because it's all based on capacity upgrades, and that's a tough one. Mm-hmm. That's why it's going to be staggered. But the new revenue business model is really being driven by the customers. Yeah. The enterprise and the business are driving it. And it's really interesting from, I was at an event with the CTO of Etsy, and he said, he was very clear about the standard situation where for 2G, 3G, and even 4G, the verticals would come in and say, can you do this, can you do that? And we said, no, we're focusing on this market. And with 5G, they said, well, actually, let's listen to everybody, and let's make the standard malleable. And that's what's coming with the second generation, second family, the ultra-reliable low latency next year is designed to handle all of those needs. And the big objective is to have a multitasking network.
Correct.
Which can give an SLA for many types of customers. And what I was saying earlier about the merge of digital infrastructure with physical infrastructure, the digitization of physical infrastructure and network infrastructure and IT infrastructure, is that increases the possibility to have latent capacity, whether it's processing, whether it's radio, whether it's transport. The more you have latent capacity, the more you can cut it up and sell it, which is what AWS does. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way to make money. So that's why it's such a big business opportunity for everybody to be open, because the more open you are, the more you have the latent capacity, and the more you can sell.
In fact, the story that you just shared at our prep session about Ethernet and AWS, that's actually quite it's a blessing and alarming to me. Actually, if you...
So this is news that came out of MWC Americas
at noon today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're not here, unfortunately, but Ethernet is one of the TIAC startups.
Using Intel?
Using Intel, really?
Of course.
Surprise. But basically, they showed a demo at 12 o'clock. They launched a service, actually, a new web service from Amazon, which uses their virtualized EPC. Basically, they've ported that onto the AWS cloud. And this will be commercially available within weeks, I believe. And they showed the demo pretty much. Their focus there was on IoT market, so industrial IoT, where a lot of companies, they don't have the spectrum, they don't want to, they don't really know how to engage with that ecosystem and still be compatible with standards. So they use CBRS spectrum, so the lightly licensed. And they ported all the complexity of the management of the IoT devices onto either the edge or the cloud. So they had an edge device where you can run it from there. And pretty much you can, soon, like the other 18 or so web services they have, they will now be selling network functions as another AWS service where you just click on it. You can download, you can decide whether you want it all run from the cloud, control and user plane, or have the user plane run from the edge. And this is, in a way, as you say, scary as hell.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really exciting because this is what operators should be doing now in partnership with the cloud players. And Google have been doing something similar, to be honest. I mean, they've been doing lots of stuff on the EPC as well. But basically, the operators need to get involved in that, show the value that they have, because the edge, your favorite word, apart from blockchain, the edge was our world. It was the RAN world. It was the operator's world. We were close to the customers, and for years,
and you have all the location. You have all the location. You have all the cell towers.
Just on this and open, right? Just I have to pick this up, right? So you mentioned open like Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services is not open. They have a platform, a very robust platform. You say, if you want to interact with our platform, this is what you use.
I didn't say they were open. I said they're the threat.
Yeah, well, they're the threat, absolutely.
They're the threat. If you don't open up and you don't actually...
But that's a different open up. That's where you expose your assets. So maybe what the CSPs have to do, and I think this is what we're kind of coming to the conclusion on, is it's not that we worry about interconnecting the components, but we expose a platform and say, if you want to exploit our 5G network for this business case, this is how you interact with us, and become expert in that exposure layer, or that service exposure up, and let the experts potentially, autonomous vehicles do their expertise, or whatever the next 5G case is.
Yeah, but the choice will be there. I mean, an industrial IoT concern will have the choice of buying the service off AWS using CBRS spectrum and buying some edge servers locally, running it themselves if they want to. Or they could go to CSPs and probably have an existing engagement with a large CSP and say, what can you give me on top? And the CSP needs to position themselves there saying, we give you the experience of managing this as an end-to-end service, we give you the security, we give you integration with the network. So the stick is coming out, the carrot is taking time, the stick is coming out quickly. So the CSPs, I think, who don't see that will struggle. So they do need to get into that market, and some are doing that.
What's happening today? I mean, Klaus, what are you seeing from telco customers in terms of what they're needing, what they're looking for in their networks? If we're hearing all this of what's coming up and where they need to be, what are they doing today?
Well, again, I don't have the broad view that you see from a CSP perspective or from a net perspective, but in looking at the IT infrastructure that support those networks, our customers are looking, the CSP customers, for the openness that will allow them to have a choice of vendors, and then for companies like HP to help drive the standards that will help them open up the network. We're moving from virtualization in the sense of virtual machines to a service-centric 5G network where it's all about microservices and containers, and that's a very different world. And they're looking to the roadmap that will enable that innovation to come in, even if it's not all ready today. And I think that's the big challenge. We are not about the world of 4G where we define the network, now we go build it. We need to start build a network that's going to carry 5 times the traffic that is carried today, and it's going to be completely different 5 years from now from where it is today. So it's that uncertainty and how to harness the innovation that will come along.
Was the industry's early planning slightly misguided? I mean, we spent so long looking at NFV as a key fundamental drive and building block, if you like, of 5G, and yet now we're hearing that NFV may not be the answer.
Well, I don't think it was misguided. It's just the way we tended to view NFV as a technology thing. Now, what it really brought to the industry was a disaggregation of the business model, so that again, you know, we have a model where companies like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise can make better computers, Red Hat can create better operating systems, and vendors like Ericsson can build better applications on top. But the innovation of those layers become independent and therefore faster, and there's competition in each layer, so it brings efficiencies in. And so I don't think NFV was a mistake in that sense, but it was a first step in a world now where it's no longer about OpenStack, right? It's the whole, you know, we look at the operating environment. That is changing. It's no longer about just a processor picking packets off a standard NIC. There's all the different acceleration coming in for analytics and AI that'll happen on the edge. That has to be absorbed in.
Welcome to our world.
Yeah.
But without NFV, we will never be where we are today,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this might not be the end game, but this is actually what enable us. Like, if you, for example, I just picked up what Jason said. How do we ensure that the CSPs actually monetize? So we actually, the Intel team that I'm part of, actually put out this SDK, software development kit, a library function, where we want to expose the network telemetries upwards. Have an API, you know, both COPS compliant and SCMAC compliant, expose that upwards. So then someone like Telecom can't monetize because you ultimately own the network resources, but we expose that northbound and we allow different cloud API to plug in, but not taking over. And you also allow the enterprise to come then pick and choose the slices. That's just northbound. We were thinking that we probably want to go east-west as well, given that there are devices, communication coming up and all that. So we're going to contribute that, by the way, all to Acrano. This is not something we want to hold on. We want the ecosystem to pick it up and develop and perfect on it. But if you look at that, and what does that really mean to the enterprise? So maybe enterprise can actually place a web scale order to say, I want a slice for my connected car or the connected factories from Telecom with this SLA and so on. And ultimately, Ericsson putting that together because you have the network know-how. So I don't think it's not dire. It's not like means we all gonna disappear from face of the earth. I think we will thrive on it if we play this game right.
Yeah, I just had to pick up on your point saying that NFV was wrong, or you said it, or something like that. But I think what I'm understanding from what you're saying is that NFV conceived as it was for different markets, the concept that it can be simply plug and play applied to telco is a complicated one, and it's still undergoing. So there are areas where it can be, there are other areas where it might need adaptation because of the specific demands. But the reality, if you flip it completely and go from the operator side, and all the network operations guys, et cetera, who are complete hardware junkies, who never believed in NFV per se, they do believe in 5G. But when they realize 5G is completely based on virtualization, they say, well, maybe we should start actually having a look at that. So while there are areas where you will need the hardware acceleration, the fact is everybody in the networks world is seriously now considering that this is the future. So NFV having 5G is actually driving the uptake of NFV and operators.
I think this is a good opportunity to pause and throw the topic open to our audience. We have roving microphones. We can just about see you here. So if anyone has a question, and if we can see you under the lights, we will come to you. I see no questions at the front row whatsoever yet. Oh, there's a gentleman at the back there, I think. His hand up there, waiting patiently.
Well, I didn't think I'd be the first, but I'm going to try and pin you down with some specifics. So 5G is very much about verticals. Let's pick a vertical. Vehicular automation, connected cars, V2X, whatever you want to call it. It has a specific set of challenges. Regulatory challenges, critical infrastructure challenges, challenges with performance requirements in terms of the latency needed, et cetera, right? It's sort of a key 5G use case, but it has a very specific set of challenges, and it's not a simple one, right? And in fact, because of all those challenges, I've talked to some people who said, well, operators will never run any V2X stuff. It'll all be some kind of a national entity because of all those challenges involved. So let's take that specific use case. How does open infrastructure help unlock that the potential of that specific use case, right? And the business potential of that specific use case for the CSPs?
Okay, great question. Who would like to have a crack? Mansoor?
I'm happy to have a crack. But first of all, I'd say I don't think it's but I don't think it's the best example, because
Way to go.
only because V2X is known as one of the things you can actually start with 4G, and other people are doing with ITS, and then build the 5G on top, only for that reason. But we're happy to take that example. So what does open infrastructure give to CV2X? And in many areas of the world, especially the UK, there is a huge amount of 4G coverage going on the roads, and it's putting in LTE Advanced Pro features, which are built for mission critical, which are the building block for running a V2X network. So anybody interested in V2X, come to the UK, let's test it out there. There's no better LTE Advanced Pro coverage. So open infrastructure in that sense. You're right, there are operators who are really nervous about that business today. That's why we're doing a lot of trials, and many of those trials are in the, there's a trial called Auto Air on the V2X side, just to get operators and third parties comfortable with the business model there. But what it really gives is so you have networks that run across the roads. You have the NERTS2 network in the UK, which is all about fiber infrastructure across the roads. They're upgrading those fibers, they're upgrading their antennas that they use for their internal use cases, and they're doing a feasibility study now saying, what if we open up that infrastructure, which was always closed? What if we open up that infrastructure to 5G? What does it look like? How can we actually optimize what we do at a lower cost, but also bring in new revenues by bringing a mix of edge computing? So if you got 1,000 kilometers of roads, it's a perfect scenario for having edge compute stations, close, because those are not cities, those are roads, those are highways. So you can optimize between a mix of edge and being future-proof ready for 5G. You can reduce your own costs, and you can actually get extra revenues by bringing in the third parties on top of that. That can only work if there's a certain amount of interaction, whether that's on multi-spectrum, shared and unlicensed spectrum, whether it's access to the infrastructure on a shared basis and an open basis, and also on the IT infrastructure, especially the APIs for the use cases that those companies already use. They spend millions and millions of pounds on really legacy systems that they could do better with 5G. So that would be my answer about what open networks can give. And there's a lot more, but that's just a start.
Maybe a comment. If you just look at, if you think of the scenario where the carrier infrastructure helped the automatic vehicle, that having got rid of the borders in Europe, right? I live in Grenoble. I would hate that my car would stop at every border that I pass and grinding halt.
What about Northern Ireland?
Having to reconfigure my car. So I think, again, if you look at the opportunity for the telco industry to provide the kind of interoperability, that is the reason that the GSMA Association is having an event in the US, right? That to provide that level of openness, so a Ford Motor Company or BMW can actually implement across all these geographies and rely on companies present in those geographies to handle things like data privacy and all the other things that come in. I think it's a typical case where a lot of what's necessary in terms of culture and capability is in place in the carriers. But it needs to be an open environment, because otherwise BMW can't deploy across Europe. So I think that openness is critical for enabling those business models.
Great. Another question. There's going to be another question. Front row here. The gentleman in the front row. Very patient.
So I'm quoted with Mark Zuckerberg on TIP when I was at Gartner and published on open APIs But I've been through the telco, you name it, ex-Nortel, ex-manager networks engineering at Bell Canada way back. But I've been in the soft switch space. Back in the early 1999, 2000s, was chief architect at Siemens on WiMAX, SkyMax. Also on ATCA, back in the day with Intel, blade server architecture. So I've seen a few of these same gyrations. But as we learned, a lot of these things was service assurance, reliability, resiliency. ATCA didn't have the complete story. WiMAX was, okay, It wasn't really a 4G, it was 3.5G. Now with 5G, I think we're on the precipice to learn from our mistakes, to learn, how to do end-to-end service assurance, how to do NFV the right way. With M-Cord, I think there's a lot of potential there. And now it's about connecting the dots. Now, the topic here, open infrastructure. Do you really want to open everything with service, resiliency, privacy, security? Or should it really be open APIs? Because I'm an advocate about APIs. I don't think you need to give away the source. You don't need to be on GitHub. You don't need to be on Top Coder with Wipro or whomever. You don't need to share everything because open code means open to hackers, there's always vulnerabilities that we haven't thought of. But open APIs, I think, is the best way. So just any thought processes there?
Yeah, I'll take it. Well, yeah, just to save Caroline. I'll take it. But basically, yes, I agree. And that was the point I was trying to say. It's about what we expose, right? But I want to be clear about open APIs. And if you've been in the open API debate for some time, is that sometimes the open APIs stifle innovation. And this is the point I was trying to make. Sometimes we say that this is the standard. And then innovation comes along and says, well, I don't fit the standard. So I create a branch, hopefully to get it back into the standard. So I'm all on for being API driven, but they're not infallible themselves. They're not the perfect answer. I think that's what we were trying to get to, what open actually means is, I don't think my experience, the operators are not saying to us, we want to know every bit and piece of your component. No, you just give us the platform. We will tell you how many customers, and if I need an extra charging instance or whatever, just spin it up for me. Get the compute, run it, kill it when I'm done. They want that, and because that's where they see the value proposition is. Because then they can go to BMW or whomever's running their IT and say, hey, BMW, we have standard APIs to your point, and if you want to talk to us, we can charge you a cent per call or whatever that's where it needs to go. And I think that's the aspect for open. And I think open to that degree doesn't stifle competition, because continuing the car analogy, the brake is in the middle, the clutch is on the left, accelerator is on the right, if you have a clutch. That's a standard, right? But yet, we've all different shapes of cars. And I'd rather say, as a driver, right, you can have a different experience. As an operator, this is what we expose up. We compete on how we do it. And I think open APIs or an API standard is key, particularly for 5G. I think it is going forward, yeah.
So, if I could just add, so it's an interesting point because you raised some interesting issues there. But I would flip it completely. And in the UK, the trials that are being proposed by the government there with open citywide platforms start with the security. So open doesn't necessarily mean non-secured. You're secure by design, and that is embedded into it, and also carrier-grade service quality. So there's skin in the game. So anybody who wants to make any money out of telecoms has got to take a risk where you're offering a service that nobody else can do. If that service fails, you've got to pay penalties. So all of that is embedded into the design, and there are people who are still willing to go ahead. And I would just kind of, on one point, there is a perception, which is very widespread, that open source means open to hacking and less secure. And I think that perception should be challenged, because, is it more secure? Is it more open to hacking if it's a closed software development where nobody really knows what the source code, you don't even know if that source code is what you have in your actual network? And there are too many of those cases which are popping up and down, and everybody's had them, which means that in many cases now people are realizing that actually the open source environment for development, which is then hardened and secured by design, is actually an easier way to be sure of what you have there than a non-open source or a proprietary software. So that perception is being challenged now.
Well,
Klaus?
No, I think it's also about pooling of purchasing power seen from a CSP. You mentioned ATCA. I think it's a good example that when you try to do things in a too specialized way, there wasn't enough purchasing power to really drive the kind of efficiencies. It was too, it was, thermally inefficient. The innovation was too slow, etc., because it was designed for a smaller market. We have to find ways that allows carriers to pool their purchasing power and align it with what's going on in the IT industry at large.
Exactly.
And then it can be open and closed. I think if we're going to take it to the extreme, I would like for Intel to publish their chip designs so others can build an Xeon. That is not so different from demanding open source, right? How far do we go? I think Intel might challenge me on the idea they continue to make money at the rate they're doing if that was a requirement, right? So I think, but our customers like to see that openness. They would like to have a choice between Intel, AMD, and ARM, and we will make that possible. So we just got to, be a bit balanced in where we demand openness.
Any more questions from this side of the room? And we had two from this side. Anyway, one over here. Last chance. Oh, sorry, right in the middle. It's coming from behind. If it just.
So can you elaborate? What do you think is a real exposure? And I don't know. I tend to agree with you, but I'm curious about it.
Sure. So to me, so basically, if you look at Amazon, let's pick them, and Google are in a similar, and Azure is in the same, or Azure is in the same boat, right? So what Amazon have done very well is it started off, to this gentleman's point, the API layer. And they started off very simple queuing system. And they got it really good, to be fair to them. And then they grew up with that model. So if you look at it, you go to Amazon, you log into a console, you get a certain number of services. It's very well defined, and you consume on compute. I think operators with 5G need to go to that, need to go to the point and say, this is our API exposure. If you want an automotive slice to manage your BMW car down the motorway doing 100 miles an hour, whatever it's doing, then this is how you interact with our platform. And we will monetize that interaction. So in other words, it's 1,000 calls is $1, whatever we're charging to make a difference. And I think that's where CSPs will add the value. And to the point that panelists made here is that, if you take that and you expose that, then you can actually, it doesn't matter whether you're going to decide it's going to be on the edge or whether it's going to be done centrally, you match your service levels against it. And I think that's where CSPs need to grow up. And need to grow up and say, you know what, because the reality is, Amazon Web Services, it's the 600-pound gorilla in the room. You can't take them on directly, but what assets do I have as an operator? And I think that's where standards come in. To the BMW example, moving around the country, we should expose that. I think that's where it needs to go. And if you look, it's interesting, if you look at where telco has come, the question about was NFV I won't say a mistake, but was it a challenge? I was in a situation where we were pushing through NFV in a previous role, and I had my IT team and my technology team. And the technology team were celebrating, high-fiving to get NFV. And my IT guys go, yeah, welcome to 15 years ago. So there was a big disconnect between the teams, right? And we're high-fiving each other for virtualizing. Where the IT guys, well, they've been doing it since the 60s, right, in mainframe. So they're looking going, what are you celebrating? So I think when we come above that level, right, really where we need to mature as CSPs is how can we exploit what assets we have? And that, for me, is not necessarily about opening the, Intel's chip designs. Yeah, just publish them on the web. Off you go, right? It's not about that. It's about if you take what Intel done way back, say, here's our x86 architecture. Here we've evolved it to x64. It's obviously Intel do way more than that, but that's how it evolves. I think that's what CSPs have to do. And that's the asset to expose.
Unfortunately, we are really against the clock here. I've got a couple of quick questions I'd like to ask our guests, if I can, just to wrap things up. Clash, if I can start with you, and we'll go down the line again. 5G, commercial 5G is just around the corner, at least in its first iteration, first phase, 2020. It's, 18 months away or so. What does this new, more open infrastructure need to look like if CSPs are going to be ready for 5G?
Well, I think we need to start with 4G. If we look at the success of 5G, it will be based on the business, the new business that gets created. And for the most part, there's very little that can be done with 5G that you can't start to offer as early services on a 4G network. And then when 5G comes along, it gives the carriers additional competitive advantage. If we build the networks first and then start thinking about the services, it's too late because there are other people out there that are really, really good at innovating on top of those transport networks. So I think the 5G network should look a bit like the 4G networks once the 5G lands as a real industrial implementation in that sense. The services should be there already, just not as good as they'll be with 5G.
Yeah, I think it's I wouldn't really agree with that. I'd say it's more of a tiered approach than any other standard. And we've always had waves of standards coming into any new technology. But in this case, it's very different because you got the current version, the release 15, which is based about enhanced mobile broadband. That is the traditional, cake of the operators, and that will move ahead. That will be launched. That will carry on going. But it's not a revolution.
This is new radio, really.
New radio, and then there's a new core coming in as well, eventually. But so I think what in terms of the open networking side, it's really coming from the release 16, which is going to be standardized by the end of the next year. Which means that's why the early hype has been good, because we have that time now. We got a lot of focus. We have a lot of people who are interested. We can actually work out the issues of the next year so that standard is damn good. And that standard is the part that I was saying the ETSI has defined to be open to all these use cases, and that's pure openness. It's standard as a service, basically, which is incredible for our industry. So that's the big opportunity. Let's work on that URLLC standard for release 16. Let's all get involved with the trials. Let's work out how we monetize it. And the only way you can do that is with real field trials, and that should be the focus, I think, for the next year.
Caroline?
I just build on what Mansoor said. We need to make 5G platform a more service-centric platform. We need to publish our API and adopt agility. I just know that telco did not invent Pokemon Go. Somebody else did, okay? It's not us. We had to attract developers. That's a huge thing. I've been working on edge compute, it seems, years. And it's the same crowd of developers showed up, which is the telco crowd developers. Just frustrates me. We actually, along with AT&T, has an event, and it's the same crowd. We got to attract the people who did Pokemon Go. What's a killer app? People can say, oh, what's a killer? What's a killer? Well, killer is not going to happen if we keep going this way. We do. We have to do this. Publish our API. Attract the kids that are writing application today. I mean, I'm really talking about kids. Not this crop of it.
Oh, Mustafa, you've got to follow Caroline. I'm very sorry about that, but Mustafa.
I mean, in terms of 5G monetization, I think the enhanced mobile broadband will be like a continuation of 4G. Fixed wireless access has a viable plan. These are all B2C plans. The ultra-reliable low-latency network and massive machine type is a B2B. So telcos has to talk with BMW, for example, right? And telcos' reliability mindset and BMW's reliability mindset is different. We need to get expertise, and we need to share the SLAs so that we can make it work. Otherwise, there will be showstoppers in the B2B plans.
Jason?
I think for me, where traditional telcos have failed, to Caroline's point, is we don't know all of the use cases that will come.
That's right.
And I think the challenge is we sit down and we brainstorm, this is what they want. And guys go, how do I monetize that? Or this is what I want. But I think, building on everything the panel has said so far is that we should just be ready, if it is the next Pokemon Go, that we're not caught catching up. And it should be Pokemon Go on our platform. Such that we attract customers. Because if I want to play Pokemon Go, I need to go to this. And I think that's what it needs to be. And that's where the competition. And if you look historically, telcos suffer with OTT providers, whether it's Netflix, whether any of the over-the-top providers. They struggled because basically they got all the revenue with no infrastructure cost deployment. And the telcos bled that. I think now is the opportunity with 5G to reset that.
Final quick question from all of you. We'll come back the other way. Jason, if you can kick off on this one. Sure. And I think it will be a brief answer. Is there a future for CSPs that do not transform their infrastructures ready for 5G?
No.
Succinct. Mustafa?
No.
Is it one word possible?
No.
Has to be no.
No.
Well, on that definitive bombshell, we should have to call it a night. I'd like to thank all my guests and everyone in the audience here in Los Angeles and everyone who's watching it online. Thanks to our sponsors as well for the evening, Hewlett Packard Enterprise and Intel. We really love these panels and are very appreciative of your support. Caroline and Klaus and Jason and Mustafa and Mansoor, thank you all very much indeed, and hope to see you again sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.